Joining me now from New York by phone is Dr. Brian Greene, professor of mathematics and physics at Columbia University. A leading theoretical physicist, he is also, like Richard Feynman, a best-selling author. The Elegant Universe was a Pulitzer finalist and winner of the Adventist Prize, Britain's top science book award. Welcome, Dr. Greene.
Thank you.
If Richard Feynman were alive today, do you think he'd be doing the kinds of things you're doing to bring your ideas and work to the general public?
Well, I think Feynman certainly had a great interest in bringing ideas that, for the most part, are hidden within the academy, within the hallowed halls of physics departments, and bringing them out to general audience, general people. I mean, he, like most physicists, got into the game because they were completely wowed as kids. They were completely bowled over by the wondrous features of the universe. And he, for one, certainly wanted that experience to be something that would be more widely appreciated by the general public. So I do think that he would carry on and continue the quest, if you will, to have a general public that's as excited about science as we physicists are. He was certainly one of the rare physicists who, to use a hackneyed term, which in this particular case is completely justified, was a legend in his own time. I mean, Feynman rose above all other physicists as the one to emulate, as the one to revere, and certainly he showed a certain side of his personality in the Challenger hearings, which I think reflects well on how he did physics. He would look for the simple solution that was staring everybody in the face but required a genius of insight to bring forth. And that's, in a sense, what he did with the Challenger.
What were the ways in which his work influenced your own development as a physicist?
Well, everything that we do in modern physics relies upon quantum mechanics. And that quantum mechanics in its more robust form that is able to describe how the fundamental constituents of nature, like electrons and protons and quarks, how they all behave, is in something called quantum field theory. And if you open a book on quantum field theory, and there are many such textbooks today, you will see Feynman's name on almost every page. Because Feynman developed the subject, he developed the techniques by which the subject can be put to practical use to make calculations. And just to give you a sense, using the ideas that Feynman put in place, scientists have made calculations about particles like electrons, little tiny bits of matter. And some physicists have spent decades carrying out these calculations using Feynman's techniques. And the results that they have found agree with the measurements that other experimentalists have undertaken. The theory and experiment agrees to better than 10 decimal places. An absolutely astonishing agreement between calculations that are done using Feynman's techniques and measurements of the real world. The most impressive concordance between theory and experiment that has ever been made. When it comes to science, he was just, how can I say it? He was just one of those rare geniuses. I mean, people often say, how would Feynman have solved this or that problem? And the apocryphal, humorous answer, I guess, that some of his colleagues give is, he says, well, Feynman writes the problem on the board, and the way he solves it is he stands there for a moment staring at the problem, and then he writes down the answer. And that's just something that most of us can't do. Most of us have to sit down and grind out the math, grind out the equations in order to find the answer. But Feynman had this uncanny insight, which just allowed him to intuit answers and then put the mathematics in later if he needed it.
Can you tell us a little bit more about quantum mechanics in that? Can you explain more about what it tells us about the world and the universe?
Well, in Newton's time, physics was a fairly straightforward subject. Newton developed mathematical laws that would describe what you see in everyday life. You throw a rock with a certain speed, you want to know where it will land, and Newton wrote down these equations that are able to predict where the rock will land, and the rock lands where the equations said it will. Similarly, you look at the moon. You want to know where it will be at a given moment. Newton's laws tell you where it should be, and you look up in the sky, and it's just where the equations say it should be. Quantum mechanics comes along and says, Newton's way of looking at the world is very misleading. It only works when things are big. quantum mechanics says that when things are very small, molecules, atoms, and subatomic particles, a whole new set of ideas, a whole new set of mathematical laws come into play, which are vastly different from those of Newton because of the following. Whereas Newton would say, I will tell you where the rock will land, quantum mechanics says when it comes to electrons, you can't do that. The best you can do is give a probability of where it will land. So quantum mechanics comes along and says, I'll tell you the probability that the particle will be over here, or the probability that it will be over there, but that's the best I can do, because that's the way nature works. Nature has a built-in level of uncertainty coming from the probabilistic formalism of quantum physics.
Was quantum mechanics the most important area of his work?
Well, quantum mechanics in this guise of quantum field theory, I think, is perhaps the most lasting contribution. It's certainly the one that most physicists are most familiar with, and it's also the contribution that we still use in the form that Feynman gave it to us many, many decades ago. So when we teach quantum field theory today, it's a course that I teach from time to time, we teach about Feynman diagrams as the primary calculational tool. These little diagrams that you can draw on a blackboard and then translate into mathematical equations using a dictionary that Feynman gave us, and we use that technique over and over again.
In your own work, do you use some of these same techniques?
All the time. If you are a pure mathematician, there's a certain kind of unwillingness to bend the rules of mathematics because you've been taught from a very early age that you just don't do that. Physicists are sort of avant-garde mathematicians. They come in and they say, we're going to break the traditional rules of mathematics, use it in a way that suits our physical problems, and we'll judge the result by whether it makes predictions that are confirmed by experiment. And I have to say, in recent years, many mathematicians have started to allow themselves the freedom that physicists have given themselves for many decades, and then if that freedom takes them to interesting places, they try to fill in the rigorous mathematics after the fact. In other words, they've been trying to be inspired by the results that have been coming from physics.
How has your own work, which focuses on string theory, grown out of Feynman's? And again, I think you'll have to help us with an explanation of what string theory is and the particular area that you are focusing on.
Well, one of the big unresolved questions that really goes back not to Feynman per se, but to Einstein, is can it be the case that we can have a unified description of all of nature's forces and all of the matter that makes up the universe? Is there, in a sense, a master equation that describes absolutely everything? And the problem toward developing this master equation has been a conflict between the laws of quantum physics, again, a lot of which Feynman developed and took to the most refined level, a conflict between the laws of quantum mechanics and the laws that Einstein gave us in the guise of something called general relativity. Those are the laws of gravity. So there's been a conflict between the laws of gravity and the laws of quantum mechanics for a very long time. And string theory is an approach that claims to have resolved that conflict, giving us one body of physical law that can embrace everything at once. It's a highly controversial subject. It's very much a work in progress. It certainly uses the techniques that Feynman wrote down in quantum mechanics, in quantum field theory, to do its analysis. So Feynman is there all the way through. But would he approve of what we're doing? That's less clear. Certainly when he was alive, he didn't have the nicest things to say about string theory. I think that the progress we've made in the ensuing decades would convince him that we're on the right path, and I think he would be in favor of it now, but that's a conjecture.
What do you think is the nature of the relationship between mathematics and physics? And historically, what are the ways in which we have changed our views of that relationship?
Bottom line is, I don't know the answer to that question, but let me give you just some rough thoughts. I've struggled with that question for some time because my work, as is the work of many theoreticians, is purely mathematical. Everything I do is based upon manipulating mathematical equations. So you naturally ask yourself, is it the case that the laws of the universe are fundamentally etched in the language of mathematics? Or is it the case that We have stumbled upon a particular language called mathematics that happens to be a very insightful and economic way of describing the physical universe. Or a third possibility, one that I find kind of intriguing, could it be the case that one day in the future we communicate with aliens from some distant planet and we begin to exchange information and we learn from them that they've developed a wonderful field called physics that can describe the universe around them, but the language within which they have developed it is not mathematical? Could it be that they say to us, yeah, we tried mathematics many, many centuries ago, and it took us just so far, but we found this totally new approach, a new language that's not mathematical, and it's actually better at describing the universe than mathematics. Is that possible? Some scientists would say that's just impossible. Mathematics is synonymous with how we describe the universe. Others disagree with that. So I think the relationship between math and physics is a real subtle one, and it's only going to be in the future, when we understand the deepest laws even better, that we can give a full answer, I think, to whether math is a tool or whether it really is how the universe works.
Thank you so much for talking with us today. This was very, very interesting.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.